Republicans blocked the Democrats' voting bill yesterday. They got only 50 of the 60 votes needed to clear it. The bill would federalize the election process, force states to require ballot harvesting. It would ban state voter ID laws and send taxpayer money to political campaigns. Republicans say the states run their own elections constitutionally, obviously, and this bill instead creates undue federal power. Joining me right now is Wyoming Senator and member of the Energy and Foreign Relations Committees, John Barrasso. Senator, great to see you. Thanks very much for being here this morning. Tell me about the vote yesterday and where this goes now. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris both said the fight is not over. And now there's this conversation traveling about perhaps them trying to put some of the elements of that bill into smaller packages to try to pass each one individually. Your thoughts?
Well, that bill was defeated for all of the right reasons. Look, Maria, that bill was one designed to make it easier for Democrats to cheat so they would never lose an election again. And they called it vote S1, Senate Bill number 1, because it was their number one priority for the year. Higher priority than the economy, than inflation, higher economy than the crisis than the crisis at the border, than crime in our streets. It was their number one priority. But you ticked off the different issues as to why it was such a bad idea. It eliminated voter ID. 80% of Americans think you ought to show a picture, a photo ID when you go to vote. Ballot harvesting, and think about that. Paid political operatives going door to door, nursing home bed to nursing home bed, collecting ballots, hundreds, thousands of them, and then deciding what to do with them. And then, of course, matching money by the federal government to fund campaigns of candidates who are already incumbents that deserved to lose yesterday, and it did.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things that we mentioned about S1 and, of course, in the House, it was H.R. 1. We haven't heard from corporate America on any of this. I mean, all of these things sound really bad. The Constitution says the states do their own elections. This was the opposite of that. And ballot harvesting, doing away with IDs and doing away with going in person and making mail-in ballots the standard. How come we didn't hear from MLB and Delta Airlines and all these other companies that were complaining about Georgia's voting bill?
Yeah, it's interesting that they said nothing about it, but remember that what I just described is just the tip of the iceberg. This was an 800-page bill that took elections away from the states, away from Wyoming. And our Secretary of State said, look, it makes it easier to cheat. It loses the integrity. People know what they want with balloting. They want ballot security, ballot accountability. That's what Americans wanted. It would be nice to see corporate America stand up for those things.
Yeah, I really would. So, Senator, let's talk about what is possible to get done and what isn't, because there are a lot of, pie-in-the-sky ideas out there from the Democrats, and then some really questionable things like, hitting right at the Constitution, making D.C., Puerto Rico states, obviously this S1, spending $6 trillion in the president's budget. What do you believe the Democrats will be able to push through, whether it be by agreement or reconciliation, and what won't they be able to get through of this overall radical agenda of this administration?
Well, you're right. We have a 50-50 Senate. That should be a mandate to move to the middle. But it's not. The Democrats are trying to move as far to the left as possible. And there are two parts to that. One are just all the radical things, the spending, the $7 trillion so-called infrastructure bill, where very little has to do with what we think of as core infrastructure of fixing our roads and our bridges and those sorts of things. And then this other part that they're focused on, which is changing election laws so they will never lose an election again. Doing things like D.C. statehood, two permanent Democrats on their side of the aisle forever. And then, of course, stacking the Supreme Court. There's legislation to add 4 members of the Supreme Court by President Biden immediately. And these, of course, be very liberal members of the Supreme Court. We have a 9-member court, and it would change the makeup of the court. Those are the things that would fundamentally change America. And the Republicans, of course, want to do things in a bipartisan way. We have a bipartisan infrastructure bill that's now working its way through the system that actually focuses on real infrastructure. I think we can get that done, but we can't afford as a nation the kind of spending and the kind of tax increases that the Democrats are proposing right now.
Well, you've said on this program and on Sunday Morning Futures that you will not change the 2017 tax cut legislation. Can you do that with even a $1 trillion hard infrastructure plan? Or will President Biden be able to get tax increases through reconciliation later on in the year through another bill?
Well, they're going to try to do what you just described, reconciliation later in the year for the full $7 trillion bill, which I describe as the bullet train to socialism, where they call it infrastructure, but the number one component spending of it is Medicaid expansion. It is the whole Green New Deal. It's recyclable cafeteria trays and the huge tax increases that would go with it. The bipartisan bill that's being worked on right now, for me to even support that, it's going to have to meet a couple of tests. Number one, it has to be true infrastructure, really fixing our roads and our bridges, dealing with ports and airports, waterways, real infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and it has to be paid for credibly. Not just adding money to the credit card, not gimmicks. It has to have real pay-fors, and it cannot touch the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which have given us really the best economy in our lifetimes.
Yeah. What about this Green New Deal? I mean, President Biden wants the U.S. to own electric cars in the future as a country. Conservationists, though, are pushing back, trying to block the lithium mining at one of the mines that would be crucial toward reaching the administration's goal to ramp up production for batteries. Senator, how much of this Green Deal will materialize?
Well, yeah, I mean, you got it. Remember, in this big $7 trillion Biden plan, there's more money for electric vehicles than there is for roads, bridges, ports, airports, and waterways combined, with huge subsidies for rich people to buy electric vehicles. Well, the biggest component of an electric vehicle is the battery, and the most important element there is lithium. Well, where do we get the lithium from? China. So there are a couple of places in the United States where there's lots of lithium. We can't mine it because the environmentalists are blocking it. So the environmentalists who want the electric cars also want us to be more dependent on China as the source of the lithium.
Wow. Real quick before you go, how come no one's even reacting to what the CCP has done in Hong Kong? I mean, we're looking at pictures this morning of journalists being handcuffed and taken out of the Apple Daily offices because the CCP raided it, took all their journalistic notes because they're stomping out free speech and any democracy in Hong Kong. Shouldn't the free world be doing something about this, or are we just watching the CCP take over wherever it wants to?
Well, we see the actions of China and their reach and how they're showing us what strategic adversaries that they really are to us and what enemies they are to democracy. You're absolutely right in terms of their actions now, and I expect a number of senators to speak out about it today, likely on the floor of the Senate.
All right, Senator, it's great to see you, as always. Thanks very much for walking us through all of that. Senator John Barrasso this morning in D.C.